I had a difficult choice of topic for tonight because this is the one parasha in the Torah that has a huge amount of mitzvahs. I think it's over 70. And they're kind of all little half verses because sometimes two mitzvahs are combined together in one pasuk. So I didn't know, it kind of, was maybe a little bit random, but I was driving with Rivki in the car this afternoon, and then a tune came into my head. And I thought, okay, it's from this week's parasha, and after having sung, because the car windows were closed, I then said, okay, let's talk about that. Or to be more correct, Rivki said, why don't you give a share on that? Tonight, as she remembered, she had a little booklet that she had put away one day that we got. So she managed to locate it. And so some of what I'm going to say to that's actually to be credited to this little book, which was compiled by Ruvain Garber, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Credits must be somewhere. He definitely was quite involved with that. So with thanks for that little booklet and other sources. So what was the song that I was singing to myself? And what is the topic of our shiur? It's the mitzvah of sending away the mother bird when you want to take the eggs. And it's a very interesting mitzvah in that one has to delve into the reason for it and the benefit for it. It's in fact one of the few mitzvot where the reward is listed in the Torah, but now what is the reward? So this is what we read about in this week's parasha. This one is not half a verse, it's actually two verses. So along the road, you chance upon a bird's nest. I'm not singing, sorry. On the ground, in a tree, on the road, are the efrachim, which are little birds, fledglings or eggs, beitzim, and the mother is kind of sitting, hovering over the babies or the eggs. You may not take the mother together with the young. So you may not take the mother, or even take the young in front of the mother. Rather, so that's the prohibition, the lo ta'aseh, rather, you must let the mother go. Shalech to shalech, that means you must chase her away. Abanim tikachlach, you take the children, the young for yourself. And then the Torah lists the reward, the man yitavlach varachta yamim, in order that things will be good for you and that you'll be granted long life. Now, how do we fulfill this mitzvah? Simply, you come upon a nest, and what you do is you want to take the eggs or the babies, but I don't know what you would do with the little birds, but at least the eggs. Then you send the mother away. You take the eggs, and the easiest way to fulfill this mitzvah here in South Africa is because they are weavers are commonly build nests on our properties, and you can then fulfill the mitzvah. Of course, you got to have patience and let the weaver build its nest, and according to the myth, apparently Mrs. Weaver then destroys the nest, and Mr. Weaver's got to rebuild it again. I've heard another version of this, that this is how Mr. Weaver courts the potential Mrs. And if she rejects his nest, then he's got to destroy it and rebuild another one. And if you want to collect the eggs, then you would send the mother away and take the eggs. In South Africa, that would be the easiest way to actually fulfill that mitzvah, would be with the weaver. Although the nests are often found on a property, and the mitzvah is that you have to find them it doesn't belong to you. It's got to be a nest that has no ownership, what's called in halacha hefker. What you would do then is, if it's on your property, then automatically it would become yours by virtue of being in your garden. But if you, as you see, Mr. Weaver start to build his nest, explicitly say, I do not wish to take ownership of the nest, its contents. It will remain with the status of Hefker ownerless. You'll then be able to fulfill the mitzvah. And the other important thing you have to know also that the mitzvah is specifically the mother, can be the female, but it's fairly easy to identify the female from the male in the Weaver case, because that yellow tummy, that's the male, and the female is, interestingly, well, I suppose it's in the eye of the beholder, but not nearly as pretty as the gentleman in this case. So it's easy to identify mainly by that yellow stomach, which is clearly seen. So you can only do the mitzvah. For that reason, actually, you should fulfill the mitzvah at nighttime, because during the day, the Mr. and Mrs. Bird take turns watching the young sitting on the eggs, but at night it's the mother, like with humans. The husbands do their share, but in the middle of the night, who wakes up for the baby? So it's we picked that up from the bird world, it would seem. So now let's understand the reason for this mitzvah. And I'm going to start by quoting a very strange medrash. It's a medrash rabbah, and it's related to this verse. In fact, let's just look at it in the source. And here we are. This is what the medrash says. When you shall go out, and you happen upon a bird's nest before you, that's the verse we just quoted. It says the medrash on this, okay? What is the law if an infant is born circumcised? May one circumcise him? Should one circumcise him? So the sages tell us an infant born circumcised requires a prick of covenantal blood from him because of the covenant of Abraham. And that's what's commonly known as a medrash pelia, or a strange medrash, because I mean the concept of a baby that's born without a foreskin, that's a relevant one, an interesting one. What the halacha is, yes, we must do a pinprick, make a bracha, and just get a drop of blood out, because that's how he's kind of brought into the covenant of Abraham. That makes a lot of sense. Why this medrash is connected to this mitzvah of the mother bird is a bit peculiar, and the explanation is this: the mitzvah of sending away the mother bird, like many other mitzvot, is often explained on the grounds of kindness, nature, etc. It's a right thing to do. But it might not necessarily be so. So the model for this would be the mitzvah of circumcision. Now, circumcising a male is a good, healthy practice, and is often done by urologists in the hospital at birth. In many countries, that's standard, and the health benefits of circumcision are well known and have been widely researched, in particular with less of an incidence of certain diseases, infection, and so forth. However, that's not the reason why we circumcise, and the proof is what happens if a child is born without a foreskin. Is still required to go through the ceremony? And the answer is yes, he would have to go through it. So it's not only being done for health benefits, it's also being done as a mitzvah. Temporary pause. I'm back, and hopefully now that we plugged in, the battery my computer won't give it in the middle of a share, which would be quite an embarrassment. So what is that medrash telling us? That there's more to mitzvah than just the obvious benefits. That just like circumcision may be good as a health practice, but that's not what we do. We do it to induct the child into the covenant of Abraham. It's a mitzvah. Likewise, many mitzvot in the Torah, which would seem to have reasons that are very rational, also have a depth to them that goes much beyond that which meets the eye. The obvious reason, and the one quoted by Ramban, many commentaries, would be that we don't want to cause pain to the mother bird. To remove her young from her while she is there helpless, hovering over her young, and there's nothing she can do, is going completely against the mothering instinct of this bird, and would cause her extreme distress. We don't want to cause that pain, and therefore we have to follow this procedure of kind of shooing the mother away, and in that way she's spared that. What happens when she comes back to the nest and finds that some or all of her eggs have been taken away? Would that be painful? What about the story about if you have touched the nest, the mother will want to come back, and if you've played with the eggs, then she'll reject them over babies. So I decided to kind of look into that, and this is according to Google, because I don't know what the source really is, but this is one that kind of the quick answer, telling us that this is a myth. One started by a well-meaning person, obviously, who wanted to prevent children or adults from getting involved in this. So this story about the mother won't want to come back to her nest because humans have tampered with it, and the smell will remain. Well, there doesn't seem to be any substance to it. You could obviously Google the same question and get the source from where this comes. What about the pain that the animal suffers when it realizes its eggs are no longer there? Is it cruel to take chicken eggs away from them? It would seem that mother hens do not have a mother hen instinct. The only instinct they have is to actually lay the eggs. But besides that, they don't really think of procreation. And as we know, birds kind of, as soon as the eggs have hatched, will just move on. Some birds will actually teach their young to fly, and then once they can fly, well, what do they say? Fly the coop, and that's the end. There's no more real connection with them anymore. I remember, this was years ago, but just after we got married, Rivki and I visited the ostrich farm in Otsuan, and the farmer was explaining to us how they increase the production of ostrich eggs. What they basically do is that as the ostrich lays an egg, while it's not watching, they take it away. They take it to a nursery, and they then have them be looked after by what they call them incubators. And the ostriches don't actually know how to count, so they kind of lay eggs until the brood is kind of this size, and then it stops. So as soon as you continue, as long as you continue taking the eggs away, they will continue. So there's at the end of the day, ostriches are big animals. Weavers are tiny little birds with bird brains, and there's not going to be post-traumatic stress from coming back to the nest and finding that there isn't a baby there, or the eggs that she had left there, and she will move on very quickly. However, the pain in the moment of being helpless while the instinct is there to protect her young, and she's being prevented from doing that, that is tremendous pain, which we are precluded from doing. But it's actually more for us than it is for the mother bird. The mother bird, will get over this, and probably won't remember that pain very long. But this is what the Torah tells us, that you send the mother bird away, and the words are leman yitavlach. It's going to be good for you. You may fare well. The benefit is ours, not just because there might be ultimate rewards, long life, but in the fact that actually it's good for us. to develop that attribute of chesed, of kindness, of caring. It makes us better people. When we do something that helps us with our own sense of compassion, that's healthy for us. That's good for us, and that grows us. There's a lot we do the story of what is it? Covering the challah on a Friday night, so they shouldn't experience the humiliation of being disregarded while you make a bracha on the kiddush first. I don't know where you buy your challahs, but where I buy my challahs, they are without feelings at all. They have zero EQ whatsoever. There's absolutely no a sense of shame, and I've never lifted the challah cover and found the challahs blushing or white with anger and having been passed up. It's for us. It makes us into more sensitive people when we say, hey, really? When you start a meal, the first thing you should be doing is amotzi on a Friday night. You're going to pass up the wine, and you're going to make kiddush first, because there's a mitzvah of sanctification of the day, and out of sensitivity, what we have to develop, it's covered. Similar than Moses, who was told he couldn't strike the river because the river had saved him as a baby. So he couldn't create the plague of blood. But really, have you met rivers with feelings? The Nile would continue to flow without any upset, even that being turned into blood. And definitely wouldn't look up at Moshe and say, hey, I saved you way back then. It was an attribute of feeling a sense of gratitude, which a human needs, l'man yitavlach, so that it's good for you. Another reason the sages give us is that it is for the continuity of the species. It's actually, and again, it could be for us to appreciate this, but take the babies away, leave the mother, they shall procreate again. And it's important that we be involved in the preservation of the species. And if we're going to take the mothers away, well, that's going to create endangered, threatened species. And this is why we send the mother away. This is actually why the reward is connected, as we saw in that same verse earlier, with sorry, we're in the wrong place. So yeah, what's the reward? Long life. Long life doesn't just mean that the individual lives for long. Long life also means perpetual life, because if we worry about the perpetuation of the species of the bird, Hashem also rewards us by making sure that we are also perpetuated in our own personal lives. But I want to share with you now an extract from the Zohar, which puts a totally different spin on this mitzvah. And I think reading it together from the actual text, it's in Tikkun Zohar, is most fascinating, as it puts a completely different, spin on the mitzvah, which has nothing to do with kindness, and actually maybe on the contrary. So this is what the Zohar says, that when a person fulfills this mitzvah, then the bird is distressed, and she's pained. She was forced to, fly away and leave this human to do whatever with her nest, and she grieves. As a result of this, a malach that is there, designated to represent the bird, says to Hashem, wait a second, how could you have given such a mitzvah? In Tehillim, that's 145, that's Ashrei, isn't it? Or Tilal David. His compassion extends to all his creations. Rachamav al kol ma'asav. Why did you command man to send the mother bird away from the nest? So that's what happens when that mitzvah is fulfilled. It kind of, there's an angel that comes to Hashem and challenges. And Hashem then gathers the angels on high and says, look, this angel is so concerned for this little bird and complaining about its suffering. How come none of you care about my chosen nation, Klal Yisrael? Why not dismiss the fact that the Shechina, which rested in the temple, is now been sent away and exiled from his domicile. Why do you not petition me on behalf of my exiled nation, the children of Israel, when neglected and abused by the pagan nations? So Hashem uses this kind of complaint, appeal of the good advocate for the bird, and he uses this to point out that we're caring about birds, but what about the Shechina that's in exile? What about Klal Yisrael that is suffering? And the result of this is that Hashem directs his compassion to Klal Yisrael and immediately bestows upon them beneficial decrees, particularly to assist the downtrodden and poor. He also proceeds to forgive his children for many of their sins and iniquities, and proclaims, praiseworthy is the person who fulfills the mitzvah of Shiluach Haken, that's sending away the mother bird, for he causes additional mercy to descend upon the world. So that's kind of a Kabbalistic twist on this mitzvah, which puts a totally different kind of angle and spin on it. There is a interesting statement in the Talmud. It's in Brachot, page 34. I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to include this in our presentation, that deals with inappropriate prayer. So, example, if a person is leading the service, the Shliach Tzibur, and says modim modim, that would seem to be very appropriate. We bow to you, we acknowledge you, modim, we thank you. But by repeating the word modim, the implication is that we are maybe talking to a plurality of deities, and that's wrong. So if a person says modim modim, he is sent off the bimah, and he is not allowed to lead the service. If one is leading the service and gets to the bracha of Lamar Shinim, which is the bracha for the heretics, and remember, they didn't have Sidurim in the Talmudic time, so it was all from memory. And the Chazan would maybe stumble in the middle of a bracha and couldn't remember. Then people would kind of help him, prompt him, let him, compose himself, gather his thoughts, and continue. When you're trying to say something from memory and you've got an audience, that can be very intimidating and problematic. So if a person gets stuck in the middle of the Amidah, we give him some slack. If a person gets stuck in the middle of the bracha that was created against heretics, he is sent off the bimah immediately, because we say, well, the reason why he's stumbling on the words is maybe because he's got difficulty saying those words. This was actually a bracha which was composed against the Sadducees, which were the group that rejected the oral law, and they were at times very influential in the Jewish community and obtained very high positions. So it wouldn't have been unheard of to have the Sadducee be the leader of the service and stand on the bimah, leading people in prayer. But if he's stumbling in that bracha, then there's no slack. He's going to go immediately. Talmud says if a person says, as leading in prayer, God, your compassion goes even to a bird's nest. The Talmud says he is silenced, he's shooed, he's discouraged from saying God's compassion goes down even to a bird's nest. Well, does that not negate much of what we said until now? Not really. Because it's that and much more. Because the Talmud says the following words, I'm just jotting it down here. What he is doing is he's taking God's measures, God's behavior, and kind of just turning it into compassion, when really God's decrees are far wider than that. So that maybe ties in with the first medrash that I quoted, in that, yes, of course, there's compassion involved, but you cannot define God's compassion. And sometimes we're trying to define things and use metaphors, particularly you ones, very dangerous, and you can actually diminish the value of what you're saying, which is why if a person uses those words, al-Qadsi that God's compassion should reach God's compassion reaches even the bird's nest. He's told that that's not an appropriate form of prayer indeed. It's an important mitzvah, this Shiluach HaKein, and one that we should go to great efforts to fulfill. Here are some of the rewards of this mitzvah. One that hastens the redemption. Well, that would tie in with the Zohar we were quoting earlier. It is a mitzvah that is a source of merit for long life, filled with goodness and blessing. Well, that's taken straight out of the Torah, where it's used the words, it'll be good for you and you will have long life. The source of merit to get married. Well, if it is about continuity, as we discussed earlier, then marriage is quite important for the cycle to carry on, and of course along the same lines, a source of merit to be blessed with children, and a source of merit to acquire a new house. Then that's a little bit of a different slant on it. But if you look at the parsha, it's got all these rapid fire mitzvot one after the other. What's the one that follows? And Rashi goes into the sequencing of all the mitzvot. He says that they follow each other because one brings about the other. The one after the mitzvah of Shiluach HaKein is about building a new home and the obligation of putting a parapet if you've got a flat roof, to put up a fence to prevent injury. So the mitzvot are kind of one leads to another. So because of the juxtaposition, the sequencing of the parsha, we say that this mitzvah is one that actually gives you the merit of acquiring a new home, and the source of merit to protect it from evil spirits and harm. I'm not sure where the source for that is, but it is brought down. So as I said, one should endeavor to perform this mitzvah. And the Shalat tells us that this mitzvah is extremely great and wondrous. And one should actually endeavor to fulfill the mitzvah. Where am I now? Tumas Hadeshen made a special trip to another town in order to attempt to fulfill this mitzvah. So I guess they didn't have big gardens with the weaver nests, and they had to really go to great efforts to fulfill this mitzvah. Chaim Vital said their result to the effect that a person who didn't manage to fulfill this mitzvah during his lifetime will need to come back in a future reincarnation or to fulfill it. It's actually a general concept that one has to fulfill all the mitzvot to the Torah, and if you don't manage in one life, then we do come back in further reincarnations. But particularly this mitzvah seems to be a very fundamental one, and therefore Chaim Vital quotes the area saying that this would be a reason for a further life. And finally, the Yalkut sets some measures that says that the ultimate redemption will be initiated as a result of the heavenly awakening generated by Shiluach HaKein, no doubt, a reference to the Tikkun Zohar that I quoted to you earlier, which explains the process of the awakening of divine compassion that happens as a result of this mitzvah. So here you have the mitzvah of Shiluach HaKein, the mitzvah of sending away the mother bird. That's just one of the 70 plus mitzvot in the parasha. So enjoy your Torah reading this week and your study in the course of the days preceding it, and many good insights. And please God, may the bracha that is associated with this mitzvah be fulfilled even before we get a chance to find the bird with the mother hovering. Have a good night.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thanks very much, Rabbi. And have a good
Pleasure.
evening.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Rabbi.
Bye.
Have a good evening. Take care.
Good night.
Good
Night,
everybody.
everybody.